जयो राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोधनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोधनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जयो राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोधनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोधनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय राधा माधव राधे जय राधा माधव राधा माधव राधे जय राधा माधव राधा माधव राधे जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरु श्रील प्रभुपदा जय गुरु श्रील प्रभुपदा जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जाष्पाल परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र शत श्रीमती श्रीवांगे अभय चरणारविंद भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। जावं विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य स्तोत्र शत श्रीमती श्रीवांगे भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। वैराग्य मूर्ति श्रील गौर किशोरदास बाबा जी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। सच्चिदानंद श्रील भक्ति ठाकुर महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्रील जगन्नाथ दास बाबा जी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास षट गोस्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। श्री राधा कृष्ण कृष्ण बलराम गौरंग श्रीनिवास प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड गिरी गौरंग मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जय। अयोध्या द्वारका धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी क्षेत्र की जगन्नाथ जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। गौर प्रेम प्रभुपाद की जय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Ashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 2, Chapter number 7, Text number 23. Asmat prasada samukha kalaya kalesha ikshvaku vamsha avatirya gurur nidesha tishtan vanam sadaitanuja avivesha yasmin virudya dashakandara artimachat asmat prasada samukha kalaya kalesha ikshvaku vamsha avatirya gurur nidesha tishtan vanam sadaitanuja avivesha Yasmin virudya de dashakandaramathimacha. Asmat, unto us, beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant and Prasadha, causeless mercy, Sumukhaha, so inclined, Kalaya, with his plenary extensions, Kaleshaha, the Lord of all potencies, Ikshvaku, Maharaja Ikshvaku, in the dynasty of the sun, Vamshe, family, Avatirya, by descending in Guroho, of the father or spiritual master. Nideshe, under the order of Tishtan, being situated in Vanam, in the forest, Sadaita Anujaha, along with his wife and younger brother. Avivesha, entered, Yasmin, unto whom Virudhya, being rebellious, Dashakandaraha, Ravana, who had 10 heads, Artim, great distress, or achieved. Translation and purport by His Divine A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Due to his causeless mercy upon all living entities within the universe, the Supreme Personality Godhead, along with plenary extensions, appeared in the family of Maharaja Ikshvaku as the Lord of his internal potency Sita, under the order of his father Maharaja Dasharatha. He entered the forest and lived there for considerable years with his wife and younger brother. Ravana, who was very materially powerful with 10 heads on his shoulders, committed a great offense against him and was thus ultimately vanquished. Lord Rama is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his brothers, namely Bharata, Lakshmana and Shatrughna, are his plenary expansions. All 4 brothers are Vishnu Tattva and were never ordinary human beings. There are many unscrupulous and ignorant commentators and Ramayana who present the younger brothers of Lord Ramachandra as ordinary living entities. But here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the most authentic scripture on the science of Godhead, it is clearly stated that his brothers were his plenary expansions. Originally, Lord Ramachandra is the incarnation of Vasudeva, Lakshmana is the incarnation of Sankarshana, Bharata is the incarnation of Pradyumna, and Shatrughna is the incarnation of Aniruddha, expansions of the personality of Godhead. Lakshmiji Sita is the internal potency of the Lord and is neither an ordinary woman nor the external potency incarnation of Durga. Durga is the external potency of the Lord and she is associated with the Lord Shiva. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita 4.7, the Lord appears when there are discrepancies in the discharge of factual religion. Lord Ramachandra also appeared under certain circumstances, accompanied by his brothers who are expansions of the Lord's internal potency, and by Lakshmiji Sita Devi. Lord Ramachandra was ordered by his father Dasharatha Maharaj to leave home for the forest under awkward circumstances, and the Lord, as the ideal son of his father, carried out the order even on the occasion of his being declared the king of Ayodhya. One of his younger brothers, Lakshmana ji, desired to go with him, and so also his eternal wife Sita ji desired to go with him. The Lord agreed to both of them, and all together they entered the Dandakaranya forest to live there for 14 years. During their stay in the forest, there was some quarrel between Ramachandra and Ravana, and later kidnapped the Lord's wife, Sita. The quarrel ended in the vanquishing of the greatly powerful Ravana, along with all his kingdom and family. Sita is Lakshmiji, or the goddess of fortune, but she is never to be enjoyed by any living being. She is meant for being worshipped by the living being along with her husband, Sri Ramachandra. A materialistic man like Ravana does not understand this great truth, but on the contrary, he wants to snatch Sita Devi from the custody of Rama and thus incurs great miseries. The materialists who are after opulence and material prosperity may take lessons from the Ramayana, and that the policy of exploiting the nature of the Lord without acknowledging the supremacy of the Supreme Lord is the policy of Ravana. Ravana was very advanced materially, so much so that he turned his kingdom Lanka into pure gold, full of material wealth. But because he did not recognize the supremacy of Lord Ramachandra and defied him by stealing his wife Sita, Ravana was killed, and all his opulence and power were destroyed. Lord Ramachandra is a full incarnation with the 6 opulences in full, and is therefore mentioned in this verse as Kaleshaha, or master of all opulence. Text number 24. Yasma adhadu dadhiruda bhayanga vepo margam sapadi aripuram haravat didiksho dure suhunmatira matitarosha susoshna drishtya tatapyamana makaroroga nakrachakraha. Yasma dadadu dadiruda bhayanga vepo yasma dadadu dadiruda Bayanga vepo margam sapadiyaripuram haravaddidiksho dure suhranmatitarosha ushushosna drushtya tatapyamana makaroraga nakrachakraha yasma dadadu dadirudavayanga vepo yasma dadadu dadiruda Bhayanga veto margam sapadiyaripuram haravaddidiksho dure suhranmatitarosha sushona strushtya tatapyamana makaroraga nakrachakraha. Yasmai, unto whom Adha gave Udadihi, the great Indian Ocean, Uddhava, affected by fear, Angavepaha, bodily trembling, Margam, way, Sapadi, quickly, Aripuram, the city of the enemy, Haravat, like that of Hara Mahadeva, Didakshoho, desiring to burn to ashes, Dure, at a long distance, Suhrat, intimate friend, Matitha, being aggrieved by Rosha in anger, Susona, red hot, Drushtya, by such a glance, Tatapyamana, burning in heat, Makara, sharks, Uraga, snakes, Nakra, crocodiles, Chakra, circle. Translation and purport by His Divine A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead Ramachandra, being aggrieved for his distant intimate friend Sita, glanced over the city of the enemy Ravana with red hot eyes like those of Hara, who wanted to burn the kingdom of heaven. The great ocean, trembling in fear, gave him his way because its family members, the aquatics like the sharks, snakes and crocodiles, were being burnt by the heat of the angry red hot eyes of the Lord. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead has every sentiment of a sentient being like all other living beings. because he is the chief and the original living entity, the supreme source of all other living beings. He is the Nitya, or the chief eternal amongst all the other eternals. He is the chief one, and all others are the dependent many. The many eternals are supported by one eternal, and thus both the eternals are qualitatively one. Due to such oneness, both the eternals constitutionally have a complete range of sentiments, but the difference is that the sentiments of the chief or eternal are different in quantity from the sentiments of the dependent eternal. When Lord Ramachandra was angry and showed his red-hot eyes, the whole ocean became heated with that energy, so much so that the aquatics within the great ocean felt the heat. And the personified ocean trembled in fear and offered the Lord an easy path for reaching the enemy's city. The impersonalists will see havoc in this red-hot sentiment of the Lord because they want to see negation in perfection. Because the Lord is absolute, the impersonalists imagine that in the absolute, the sentiment of anger, which resembles mundane sentiments, must be conspicuous by absence. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, they do not realize that the sentiment of the absolute person is transcendental to all mundane concepts of quality and quantity. Lord Ramachandra's sentiment being of mundane origin, how could it disturb the whole ocean and its inhabitants? Can any mundane red-hot eye generate heat in the great ocean? These are factors to be distinguished in terms of the personal and impersonal conceptions of the absolute truth. As it is said in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the absolute truth is the source of everything. So the absolute person cannot be devoid of the sentiments that are reflected in the temporary mundane world. Rather, the different sentiments found in the absolute, either in anger or in mercy, have the same qualitative influence, or in other words, there is no mundane difference of value because these sentiments are all on the absolute plane. Such sentiments are definitely not absent in the absolute as the impersonalist think, making their mundane estimation of the transcendental world. Text number 25. Vakshas talas parsha rugna mahendra vaha danter vidambita kubuk jusa udahasan sadyo subihi saha vineshyati dhara hartur vispurjitair danusha Ucharato Dishainya Vakshastala Sparsha Rugna Mahendra Vaha Danter Vidambita Kukukjusa Udahasam Sadyo Subihi Sahavineshyati Dara Hartur Vispurjitair Hanusha Uchato Dishnanena Vakshastala Sparsha Rugna Mahendra Vaha Danter Vidambita Kukukjusa Udahasam Sadyo Subihi Sahavineshyati Dhara Hartur Vispurjitair Danusha Uccarato Dishainye Vakshastala Sparsha Rugna Mahendra Vaha Daner Vidambita Kukukjusa Udahasam Sadyo Subihi Sahavineshyati Dara Hartur Vishpurjitair Danusha Uccarato Dishainya Vakshastala Sparsha Rugna Mahendra Vaha Danter Vidambita Kukukjusha Udhasam Sadyo Subihi Saha Vineshyati Dara Hartur Vispurjitair Danusha Uccarato Dishainye. Vakshastala chest, Sparsha touched by, Rugna broken, Maha Indra the king of the heaven, Vaha the conveyor, Dantaihi by the trunk, Vidambita illuminated, Kukuk Jusaha all directions thus being served, Udahasam overtaken by laughter. Within no time, Asubihi by life, Saha along with Vineshyati was killed. Darahattuhu of the one who kidnapped the wife. Vispurjitaihi with the tingling of the bow. Danushaha bow Ucharataha strolling fast. Adi Shainyaye in the midst of the fighting soldiers of both sides. Translation for Glories. When Ravana was thus engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant which carried the king of heaven Indra broke in pieces. When Ravana was engaged in the battle, the trunk of the elephant which carried the king of heaven Indra broke to pieces, having collided with the chest of Ravana, and the scattered broken parts illuminated all directions. Ravana therefore felt proud of his prowess and began to loiter in the midst of the fighting soldiers, thinking himself the conqueror of all directions. But his laughter, overtaken by joy along with the very air of life, suddenly ceased with the tingling sound of the bow of Lord Ramachandra, the personality of God. However powerful a living being may be, when he is condemned by God, no one can save him. And similarly, however weak one may be, if he is protected by the Lord, no one can annihilate him. Text number 26. Bhume suretara varuta vimarditaya klesha vyayaya kalaya sita Krishna keshaha jata karishyati jananupalakshya margaha karmani chatma mahimopani bandhanani. Bhume suretara varuta vimarditaya klesha vyayaya kalaya sita Krishna keshaha Jata karishyati pajananupalakshya margaha karmani chatma mahimopani bandhanani. Bhume suretara varuta vimarditaya Bhume suretara varuta vimarditaya klesha vyayaya kalaya sita Krishna keshaha jata karishyati jananupalakshya margaha karmani chatma mahimopani bandhanani. Bhume of this entire world, Sura Itara other than godly persons, Varutha soldiers, Vimardithaya distressed by the burden, Klesha miseries, Vyayaya for the matter of diminishing, Kalaya along with his plenary expansion, Sita Krishna not only beautiful but also black, Keshaha with such hairs, Jita Jataha having appeared, Karishyati would act, Jana people in general, Anupalakshya rarely to be seen, Margaha path, Karmani activities cha also, Atma Mahima glories of the Lord himself, Upanibandhanani in relation to. Translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. When this world is overburdened by the fighting strength of kings who have no faith in God, the Lord, just to demonstrate distress of the world, descends with his plenary portion. The Lord comes in his original form with beautiful black hair, and just to expand his transcendental glories, he acts extraordinarily. No one can properly estimate how great he is. Translation. This verse is especially describing the appearance of Lord Krishna and his immediate expansion, Lord Baladeva. Both Lord Krishna and Lord Baladeva are one supreme personality Godhead. The Lord is omnipotent and he expands himself in innumerable forms and energies, and the whole unit is known as the one supreme Brahman. Such extensions of the Lord are divided into two divisions, namely personal and differential. The personal expansions are called the Vishnu Tattvas, the differential expansions called the Jiva Tattvas. As in such expansional activity, the Lord Baladeva is the first personal expansion of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Vishnu Purana as well as in the Mahabharata, both Krishna and Baladeva are mentioned as having beautiful black hair, even in their advanced age. The Lord is called Anupalakshya Margaha, or in still more technical Vedic terms, Avan Manasa Gocharaha, one who is never to be seen are realized by the limited sense perception of the people in general. In the Bhagavad Gita 7.25, it is said that by the Lord, Naham Prakash Sarvasya Yoga Maya Samavritah. In other words, it reserves the right of not being exposed to anyone and everyone. Only the bona fide devotees can know him by his specific symptoms, and out of many such symptoms, one symptom is mentioned here in this verse, that the Lord is Sita Krishna Keshaha, or one who is observed always with beautiful black hair. Both Lord Krishna and Lord Baladeva have such a hair on their heads, and thus even in advanced age they appeared like young boys 16 years old. That is the particular symptom of the personality of Godhead. In the Brahma Samhita it is stated that although he is the oldest personality among all living entities, he always looks like a new, youthful boy. That is a characteristic of a spiritual body. The material body is symptomized by birth, death, old age and disease, but the spiritual body is conspicuous by the absence of those symptoms. Living entities who reside in the Vaikuntha Lokas in eternal life and bliss have the same type of spiritual body without being affected by any signs of old age. It is described in the Bhagavatam Canto 6 that the party of Vishnuduttas who came to deliver Ajamila from the clutches of the party of Yamaraja appeared like youthful boys. Corroborating the description in this verse, it is ascertained that the spiritual bodies in the Vaikuntha Lokas, either of the Lord or of the other inhabitants, are completely distinct from the material bodies of this world. Therefore, when the Lord descends from that world to this world, he descends in his spiritual body of Atmaya or internal potency without any touch of the Bahiranga Maya or external material energy. The allegation that the impersonal Brahman appears in this material world by accepting a material body is quite absurd. Therefore, the Lord, when he comes here, has not a material body but a spiritual body. The impersonal Brahmajyoti is only the glaring effulgence of the body of the Lord, and there is no difference in quality between the body of the Lord and the impersonal ray of the Lord called Brahmajyoti. Now the question is why the Lord, who is omnipotent, comes here to diminish the burden created upon the world by the unscrupulous kingly order. Certainly the Lord does not need to come here personally for such purposes, but he actually descends to exhibit his transcendental activities in order to encourage his pure devotees who want to enjoy life by chanting the glories of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.13-14, it is stated that the Mahatmas, great devotees of the Lord, take pleasure in chanting of the activities of the Lord. All Vedic literatures are meant for turning one's attention towards the Lord and his transcendental activities. Thus, the activities of the Lord in his dealings with his worldly people create subject matter for discussion by his pure devotees. Text number 27. Tokena jiva harantam yadulukaya traimasikasya cha pada sakato pravruttaha yadringatattarapatena divisprashova unmoyanam tiva itaratharjunayorna bhabhyam. Tokena jiva haranam yaduluki kayas traimasikasya cha padha sakato pravruttaha yad ringgatantara gatena divisprushorva unmoyanam tva itaratar junayor nabhabhyam. Tokena jiva haranam yaduluki hayas traimasikasya cha padha sakato pravruttaha yad ringatantara gatena divisprushorva unmolanam tva itarathar janayor nabhabhyam. Tokena jiva tokena jiva haranam yad ulukikayas traimasikasya chapadha sakatopavrittaha yad ringadhantara gatena divisprushurva unmulanam tva itaratharjunayor nabhavyam. Tokena, by a child, jiva haranam, killing a living being, yet one which ulukikayaha, assumed the giant body of a demand. Traimasikasya, of one who is only 3 months old, cha also padha, by the leg, sakataha apavrittaha, turned over the cart, yet one who ringatha, while crawling, antaragatena, being overtaken, divi, high in the sky, sprisho, touching, va, either, unmulanam, uprooting, tu, bhat, gitaratha, anyone else than Arjunayoho, of the 2 Arjuna trees. Nabhavyam, was not possible. There is no doubt about Lord Krishna's being the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how was it possible for him to kill? Translation by S.B.2.7.23-28. Translation. There is no doubt about Lord Krishna's being the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how was it possible for him to kill a giant demand like Putana? When he was just on the lap of his mother, to overturn a cart with his legs when he was only 3 months old, to uproot a pair of Arjuna trees so high that they touched the sky, when he was only crawling. All these activities are impossible for anyone other than Lord himself. Purport. One cannot manufacture a god by one's mental speculation or by numerical words, as has become a practice for the less intelligent class of men. God is God eternally, and an ordinary living entity is eternally a part and parcel of God. God is one without a second, and ordinary living entities are many without number. All such living entities are maintained by God himself, and that is the verdict of the Vedic literatures. When Krishna was on the lap of his mother, the demand Putana appeared before his mother and prayed to nurture the child in her lap. Mother Yashoda agreed, and the child was transferred onto the lap of Putana, who was in the garb of a respectable lady. Putana wanted to kill the child by smearing poison on the nipple of her breast, but when everything was complete, the Lord sucked her breast along with her very air of life. The demand's gigantic body, said to be as long as 6 miles, fell down. But Lord Krishna did not need to expand himself to the length of the sheet demand Putana. Although he was quite competent to extend himself more than 6 miles long, in his Vamana incarnation he posed himself as a dwarf Brahmana, but when he took possession of his land promised by Bali Maharaja, he expanded his footsteps onto the top of the universe, extending over thousands and millions of miles. So it was not very difficult for Krishna to perform a miracle by extending his bodily future. But he had no desire to do it because of his deep filial love for his mother Yashoda. If Yashoda had seen Krishna in her lap extending 6 miles to cope with the sheet demand Putana, the natural filial love of Yashoda could have seen her, because in that way Yashoda could have come to know that her so-called son Krishna was God himself. And with the knowledge of the godhood of Krishna, Yashoda Mai would have lost the temper of her love for Krishna as a natural mother. But as far as Lord Krishna is concerned, he is God always, either as a child on the lap of his mother or as a conqueror of the universe, Vamana Deva. He does not require to become God by undergoing severe penances, although some men think of becoming God in that way. By undergoing severe austerities and penances, one cannot become one or equal with God, but one can attain most of the godly qualities. Living being can attain godly qualities to a large extent, but he cannot become God. Whereas Krishna, without undergoing any type of penance, is God always, either in the lap of his mother or growing up or at any stage of growth. So at the age of only 3 months, he killed the Shakatasura, who had remained hidden behind a cart in the house of Yashoda Mai. And when he was crawling and was disturbing his mother from doing household affairs, the mother tied him with a grinding pestle. But the naughty child dragged the pestle up to a pair of very high Arjuna trees in the yard of Yashoda Mai. And when the pestle was struck between the pair of trees, they fell down with a horrible sound. When Yashoda Mai came to see the thing happenings, she thought that her child had been saved from the falling trees by the mercy of the Lord, without knowing that the Lord himself, crawling in her yard, had wrecked the havoc, so that is the way of reciprocation of love affairs between the Lord and his devotees. Yashoda Mai wanted to have the Lord as her child. The Lord played exactly like a child in her lap, but at the same time played the part of the Almighty Lord whenever it was so required. The beauty of such pastimes was that the Lord fulfilled everyone's desire. In the case of felling the gigantic Arjuna trees, the Lord's mission was to deliver the 2 sons of Kuvera, who were condemned to become trees by the curse of Narada, as well as to play like a crawling child in the yard of Yashoda, who took transcendental pleasure in seeing such activities of the Lord in the very yard of her home. The Lord in any condition is Lord of the universe, and he can act as such in any form, gigantic or small, as he likes. Text 28. Yad vai braje brajapashun vishatoya put pitan palam stva ajivayat anugraha drushti vristya chat tachudadhayetva ti visha virya vilola jivam uchatayishyat uragam biharam hridayinyam. Yat, one who, why certainly, Braje, at Vrindavana, Braja Pashun, animals thereon, Vishatoya, poisoned water, Pithan, those who drank, Palan, the coward men, 2 also, Ajivayat, brought to life, Anugraha Drishti, merciful glance, Vristya, by the showers of that Suddhaye, for purification, Ati, exceedingly, Vishavirya, highly potent poison, Vilola, lurking, Jihvam, one who has such a tongue, Uchchata Ishyat, severely punished, Uragam, under the snake, Viharam, taking it as a pleasure, Hridinyam, the river. Then also when the cowherd boys and their animals drank the poisoned water of the river Yamuna, and after the Lord in his childhood revived them by his merciful glance, just to purify the water of the river Yamuna, he jumped into it as if playing and chastised the venomous Kaliya snakes, which was lurking there. It is its tongue emitting waves of poison, who can perform such Herculean tasks but the Supreme Lord. We will stop here. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.